Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. Oh, they can't believe
that. All right. This is episode 157 of Americans Watching the Footy, our 2024 Round 3 recap, and that was a 5-day round, so yeah, we'll have a couple of those. Yeah, good time of day, I guess. I'm your host, Ethan Castle.
I'm your host, Benjamin Castle, and our mascot, Brian Harambe, is looking at all the things that I've brought in to record, and he's just looking very curiously at them, even though we've done this countless times in this space.
Yeah, I realized just now, like, such a long round, it's honestly, like, hard to remember what happened early on.
Even though those games were a big deal?
Yeah.
Well, that's why we take notes.
Even that is, like, I don't remember a ton of details. But
maybe in the future, should we just, like, record some stuff partway through?
If there's a time, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, Brisbane 10-12-72 defeated by Collingwood 14-8-92. Our long national renaissance is over instead of like our long national nightmare.
Do Australians get that?
So
maybe 50 years ago, and actually it would be 50 this year.
But despite shutting Collingwood out in the second quarter 29-0, Brisbane couldn't end up winning this one.
Like the grand final, accuracy betrayed them. And Collingwood also clearly upped their pressure from the first 3 games. Were going below league average for the first 3, led up to, I believe, 195 for the game. We're sticking a lot of tackles right away, and that really set the tone. And also, just good changes made in the second half tactically to help stem the bleeding, limiting the Lions to 1 goal, 2 in the third quarter. Even though Lachie Neale may still have been best on ground because of what he did in the second quarter in particular, Tom Mitchell limited him somewhat in the second half, and you had Scott Pendlebury and Nick Dacos getting switched around as well, and it worked. It's amazing. Like, oh yeah, you let Nick Dacos run and he does good things. This was a hard one to tell, like, other than Neale, like, who the real standout performers were, but I'm going to credit Mitchell, obviously, and I'll credit Jamie Elliott for his 4 goals, including his clutch kicking, because that's just what he does.
It was also just a lot of guys having flashes, like John Noble and Bobby Hill having great first quarters and then kind of fading back into the crowd. Billy Frampton quietly having a really good game, limiting Joe Danaher. Jack Crisp was excellent as the sub. He came in midway through the third quarter because Finn McRae just hadn't been playing well. This is what we like to call a you suck sub. So as I may have told you before, we have 4 categories of subs: injury, tactical, you suck, and victory cigar, the first of which has been used this year.
Yeah, we got all of them in this round, sadly.
But yeah, it's what we call a tactical subs, you know, just like, for example, we need more speed, or we want to go taller, or we want to go shorter.
Don't usually see the tall sub.
It happens.
The Lions liked pulling that with Darcy Ford at times, but he was in the 22 for this one.
They had some interesting lineup decisions going really tall with Fort and Payne in. You know, they took out Darcy Gardner after just a couple games. Jared Lyons coming out as well seemed a little surprising because I had liked him.
Going back to Crisp, though, in, quarter and a half, 13 disposals, 5 tackles, and a goal, helped spark a lot of their best play by just being the strong contested player through the quarter that we know he could be, but he just wasn't for the first few games. It's not like there was any real surprise like, oh, he hasn't done this before. No, it's not the case at all. It's more just like he can still do this. And it was his first time ever being the sub.
Speaking of he can still do this, much better game for Scott Pendlebury, even though he's getting fined for just like basically slapping Lachie Neal in the stomach. I think if it was closed fist instead of open hand, it could have copped a suspension.
Would have copped a suspension. But
now that I describe it like that, it's way funnier. Just slapping people anywhere other than their face or like arm is just funny. How about just an open hand slap on somebody's shin? I think that would be really funny.
And completely unexpected. Just like, no, oh wait, that wasn't my ass.
Or yeah, just punching somebody in the shin. Collingwood did a good job eliminating their mistakes in this game for the most part. And he probably isn't going to get any votes, but I thought Beau McCreary just did a lot to create scores, make those grimy plays. So I like that.
Weird thing about this game was that all the score was to the right of screen in the first 3 quarters, and it made absolutely no sense. Like, why could teams not kick to that side of the ground? Was there like some wind over there? And then Collingwood scored 4 goals in the fourth. It was just like, oh, then there was nothing wrong whatsoever.
Yeah, before that, it was 14-2 to that one end, and then each of them scored 4 at that end in the fourth. And the Lions had a bunch of opportunities that would have really helped let's see, there was Charlie Cameron with, the wind up the country road. No, that was a really funny moment. They ended up taking the lead going into halftime with Cam Raider getting Darcy Cameron holding the ball. And I thought that would maybe spark more momentum, and it didn't really. So credit to Collingwood for bouncing back from that awful second quarter. Maybe it was one of those things where they needed to physically see themselves behind on the scoreboard. I don't know what would have been different there, but their energy seemed better. Craig McRae seemed more expressive than usual, but pretty good.
This was a game that I felt like Collingwood won more than Brisbane lost. However, the Lions were only 37.5% efficient inside 50, despite being plus 13 on entries. Oftentimes, their kicks into 50 looked undefined, relying on talls too much, almost in a straight sets Melbourne kind of way. And they were beaten on ground balls as well.
That's also where a guy like Beau McCreary gets you. And just, they had a lot of opportunities where they couldn't cash in.
Is it time to sound the alarm regarding the Lions?
Well, they play North this week.
And how much concern do you take from that Freo loss? I think that's the tough one because, yes, it's a team that nobody expected to be strong to start the year.
And it was without Lachie Neal.
And in Perth.
Well, here's their next 3 games coming out of the... Gather round. Oh, yeah, that's the first time we use that tonight, and we'll probably need to keep track.
Once we hit the actual gather round later in this week, we certainly will.
I'm keeping track now. But yeah, North and then at Melbourne, and we know they play so well with the G, especially during the home and away season. Host Geelong, Giants in Canberra.
Is that the Anzac Week matchup again?
Might be. Round 7. Is round 7 Anzac round?
Yeah, that is. I mean, they tried to put a game in Canberra during that round, and that was the matchup last year because Canberra was where Charlie Cameron had his great tap goal then. So they're repeating that one. And then were they after Canberra?
Home for a Sunday night Q clash. And then at Adelaide. Ooh. Now it'll be a lot of desperation.
Now remember, Gold Coast coaches in their first Q clash. ...
Weird game though. And now that it's like 5 nights ago, it's just
more of a blur.
Yeah.
Feeling more weird and kind of fever dreamish, but not really. I think the fever dream part of it is that the Lions have lost 2 games in a row at the Gabba, which they have not done since 2018.
Let's make it free.
No promises. North, 12-9-81, defeated by Carlton, 21-11, 137 in the Good Friday afternoon game in front of another solid crowd.
More than solid. I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, 47,500. Blues ended up with their highest score against North in 36 years. And it was more of how long can North keep up? And the answer was not even a half. I mean, they kept up scoring-wise, but defensively, the problems just are very apparent, especially with Josh Goder having done his Achilles. And speaking of Achilles tendons, Callum Coleman-Jones did his in this game.
Yeah, that was sad.
It did present an opportunity for Eddie Ford to have decent playing time, though, and he kicked 2 goals, and we're Eddie Ford fans. But Coleman Jones has been through a rotten run of injuries, a lot of concussion issues, and now it's the lower body end to him as well. I wonder what North does now that he's down, though. Do you stick with Ford? Do you give Tyler Sellers an opportunity after a couple solid performances in the VFL? He was their supplemental pickup ahead of this season, and an elevation from their reserve list. In terms of this game, though, the Cullen medalists combined for 9 goals and were the recipients of a couple favorable calls. Yes, the North defenders were undisciplined, but not all of the calls I think were there.
Also 6 50s called against North, a couple of which were really soft.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the complaints about the game came from. This game was won in the midfield, though, and I say that because the Blues did a really good job in the first half. With a team effort cutting off Luke Davies-Uniacke, you had, at various times, Jack Carroll, Patrick Cripps, Adam Chera,
Notworth,
and George Hewitt, probably in ascending order, doing really good work against him, and Hewitt just won a lot of the ball in general throughout the game. I think this was one of his best games that we can remember. And it's hard for someone like him to shine in the midfield when you've got those other names there.
I thought Hewitt was excellent. First half, Chera was really good. So was Blake Akers. Both kind of were a little bit less significant second half, but both were good. Thought Matthew Kennedy had another really nice game.
Kennedy is just that good extra and versatile player everywhere on the ground, which is why I think he was cast a bit as the sub last year, but he belongs in the 22.
The thing with North, they just couldn't stop anybody in the midfield. Hardly anyone who was able to step up and get a body on anyone.
And with the Blues cutting off Davies-Uniacke, that was just made even more difficult. It was to the point that LDU went to the outside of the second half to get more involved.
I would have honestly considered dropping someone like him or Cam Zurhar back to just offer some physicality defensively. The biggest problem with this team remains that their back six is just bad, and as good of a story as Toby Pink is, and while he has some upside, he's shown why it's taken him so long to
Crack an AFL list.
And then Aiden Core as well, just not very good. It's just,
if that's your starting defense, it's going to be a problem. And I mean, as if it wasn't a problem before with Goater going out, as I said at the top of this game's discussion, it's even more apparent now, and there's not much help on the way.
Even with North coming in a bit under 40% efficiency inside 50, I still think they're pretty darn good at turning center clearances into goals. And like, you can see pieces, but everything they need to do to improve in the short term is just defense. It's kind of like, a couple of years ago, the Angels drafted all pitchers, like all 20 rounds.
I do not remember this out of the Anaheim Angels at all. I guess I just don't follow the baseball draft as closely.
It was the 2021 draft.
But they drafted pitchers with every single one.
Every single one. They signed 19 of them. Only a couple of them made the majors. It was actually their 11th round pick out of that draft that's been their best so far.
Any Australians in there?
No.
Boo.
But it's as it. I would, if I'm North, just mid-season draft, rookie draft, first-year draft, everything. Defense.
And as much as we like Colby McCurcher and Zane Dersma, it just begs the question, why did they pass up on Dan Curtin?
I just want a guy who can lay a dude out one-on-one.
That had just offered some key support. Also, want to give props to another Carlton midfielder that I'm surprised we haven't mentioned yet. It was the club debut for Elijah Hollins after serving his cocaine possession suspension, and he fit in right away into that main midfield group. One of the bigger bodies there, and got a goal as well, which was, I love the celebration with him and his younger brother, Ollie.
I thought Ollie had a really good game too. His touches weren't super high, but I liked what he did.
Yeah, and with Elijah in there, Ollie's able to slide more outside to the wing and maybe somewhat to the halfback flank if needed. And with Sam Doherty out, that's certainly needed. So both Hollins brothers in there does a lot for their structure, and it looks like they may gain Sam Walsh back a couple weeks from now as well. So with the good start there and the percentage boost from this game, still more help on the way for Carlton.
Fremantle 9-15-69 defeating Adelaide 4-10-34.
Okay, firstly, nice. There's not much else nice to say about this one.
Okay, let me remember last year when I called the like Alir goal line spoil.
This was from
Round 4. Well, here. Why don't you play back the clip of my prediction surrounding this game? I'm going to be upfront here. This might be, compared to the amount of hype surrounding it, the game I'm most excited for this round. Yeah, that was a bad prediction. That was as bad as you calling Luke Pedler for a big game last week. Pedler got subbed out this week, and I would think he'll get dropped.
Yeah, this was
amazed they haven't given Dan Curtin his debut, even though their issues are much less defensive. Which, how do the Crows, with that forward group, kick 4 goals for a game? I mean, on one hand, Frio's defense has been damn good.
Alex Pierce has risen, and the way he looks, it's honestly appropriate that he has had this sort of performance around Easter. He neutralized Tex Walker and switched at times onto Chris Burgess, who has been one of the few bright spots through these first few rounds for the Crows. And obviously Luke Ryan still doing his thing in terms of commanding the movement out of defense. Jordan Clark picking up well and continuing his fast movement off it.
Fast, but not as frantic. You know, he hasn't had the ball for like long possessions, but
no, that's never been his style. Even going back to Geelong, that was never quite his way. Just quick and well-placed deliveries. And when it comes to center bounces, he's also still structurally important there. I talked about it last week with him, being one of the first to get to the center bounce, even though he wasn't in the middle six. That persisted this week.
A crowd of more than 51,000 for a game that looked more like a 2020 game, or looked like, if you had just looked at the score from this game, you would have thought, oh, it was just like a really wet game. 42-32 after 3 quarters,
13 goals to 25 behinds total.
This 48-34 midway through the 4th.
This screams Cairns with this score.
If this was in Cairns, I would have said, like, what a beautiful piece of performance art. And instead, this was just like, it was off.
No, this isn't even one where you like stroke your chin looking at it and say, like you're trying to judge it as some sort of like weird avant-garde piece. This was a poor display of footy.
Some of that is a credit to Frio, who are just like bringing the ugly out of opponents.
I mean, the type of pressure they put on and the work of that main back group that we mentioned was certainly a big part of that. I know you credited Michael Frederick for
he put on so much pressure, and it wasn't just like staying on one guy. He would fly in and mess with 2 or 3 different people. He was awesome.
Ready!
But yeah, this was not a fun watch. Yeah, Frio's back six were probably the most entertaining and effective group in this game, although it was also a former defender in the middle in Hayden Young, who I really liked. 32 disposals, 8 clearances, 8 marks, 7 tackles, 661 meters. He was kind of just like the middleman on a lot of their exchanges. There were times when he would receive a long kick and then dish another long kick off.
Yeah, he did more the kicking.
Kicking? Oh, I want to do some kicking!
While connecting the defense to the rest of the oval, whereas Clark oftentimes did more of the quick handballing. Young had some of the longer possessions, especially in comparison to Clark, and it worked really well. He's definitely a midfielder at this point, even though some people still kind of cast him as a defender. I think some commentators were saying only the defenders should get votes for this game, and then they included Hayden Young.
Well, they like did note that he's a midfielder.
More of one now, definitely. By the way, Hayden Young, along with Caleb Solrong, being the best in the middle, just does not reflect well on Adelaide recruiting and list management when they were taken with the 2 picks after somebody who already retired.
Yeah, that being Fisher McCasey.
Mackesy? I forget how it was pronounced.
My favorite, it reminds me of I look back to the 2011 MLB draft. This is a fun one. You got, let's see, Francisco Lindor, Javier Baez, take out what he's done with the Tigers and just look at everything before that.
Like, look at his Cubs tenure alone.
He picks 8 and 9. George Springer was pick 11. Brandon Nimmo's pick 13.
Okay, that's even okay.
Pick number 10, Corey Spangenberg.
That's not a name I've heard in a couple years.
Pick number 12, Taylor Youngman.
Okay, that's a footy name.
I mean, it's spelled Jungmann. If it was spelled like young man, then absolutely. But Or let's see, Bubba Starling getting picked at number 5. Yeah, there's a lot of baseball examples of this.
Does it get any easier for the Crows this week? Nope. Short turnaround to open the gather round against the Demons. And yes, they put on a good show to open last year's, but good fucking luck.
Let me update you while we're at it on the ratio of their final score tweet.
Ooh, yes. This was a watch.
25 retweets, which I assume includes quote tweets.
Here it is. 7 retweets, 18 quotes, 187 likes, 308 replies. Yeah, that's what happens when you get more than doubled up.
I mean, it wasn't just that they got doubled up. It was that they scored 34 and just looked like shit. Their positives, let's see. Chris Burgess early. Lachlan Scholl was decent with the ball. I thought Ben Keys was decent in contests, and Brody Smith playing a milestone game.
250 for him, doing decently well, minus 1 quarter.
He had some long kicks out of the back that were right on the money. So I did like his game, but the list of positives is very short. Matthew Nix is catching a lot of heat. List management's catching a lot of heat.
And they also lost a player to injury for the season, that being Wade Millera, who tore his patellar tendon. Honestly, I hope like Brandon Walker from Frio reaches out to him, wish him well for his recovery, and like maybe give him some pointers and stuff, because Walker went through that himself last year.
Yeah, this was bad. Broadcasters loved Michael Walter's second quarter, but I thought the inaccuracy kind of undermined some of that. He finished 2-4, but he was pretty active. I'm waiting on Sam Switkowski to have a game where he gets like 20 plus touches, because he's so fun when he's involved. Other than that, I think young Josh Draper, I like what he's doing.
Yeah, second gamer, and his teammate didn't hang one on him this time.
And yeah, he doesn't look intimidated. You know, if we're going to use the nearly 20-year-old internet phrase, he doesn't afraid of anything.
That's nearly 20 years old.
Yeah, it's from like 2007.
Holy, that meme can drive.
December 3rd, 2007.
Yeah, wow.
All right, before we get into
the good games,
the 2 Saturday games, I'm going to preface this by saying we had one game that wasn't very fun that ended up having a good finish and honestly probably should have been a draw because nobody really deserved to win.
And then we have a game that we really thought strongly, oh man, this might be a draw. And thankfully somebody won it because somebody deserved to win that game.
Maybe not the team that won, as we'll get into, but one of these games should loan some of the points and award votes and stuff to the other. That's what I was really getting towards.
Yeah, so let's start with Essendon, 10-11-71, defeating St Kilda, 9-13-67. Interesting game just from the outset because you had both teams without their number one key forward. Both Peter Wright and Max King suspended for 4 games and 1 respectively. So big opportunity for some youngsters. For St Kilda, Anthony Caminiti kicked a couple. And for Essendon, taking full advantage of what could have been one of his last opportunities otherwise, was Harry Jones.
Harry!
Fucking finally been waiting, 2 years for a game like this from him? You know,
I'm happy for him.
Yeah, I mean, not completely taking over, but he's someone I labeled as a sleeper last year, but has been so set back by various injuries and hasn't had great form when he's had top-level opportunities. Jones had a pretty even impact of the air throughout the game with 10 marks and kicked 2 goals straight. Didn't need to take over with Kyle Langford there and him kicking 3 goals and Jake Strayer providing 3, including the eventual game winner, a bomb from 55. But I am so happy for Jones to finally have this opportunity. When coming into the game, I was questioning whether it was going to be his spot for long or whether Nate Caddy would get the job over him. Caddy, by the way, lost a tooth in the VFL this week.
Saints led this game most of the way. Essendon finally pulled in front with a little under 6 minutes left on a Jake Stringer goal that got what I like to call a Huddogasm. This seems to be, Jake Stringer and Anthony Hudson on Easter weekend.
I thought it was Mark Howard last year.
Well, no, I think
Jackie Stringer with the Easter Sunday barrel.
That was Mark Howard?
Pretty damn sure that was Mark Howard.
Oh, okay. That sounds to me like a Hutto thing.
Maybe
they have similar voices.
Maybe it's just Jake Stringer on Easter weekend then.
he hasn't played a very good game to that point, but stepped up when he needed to. And I mean, this was not a pretty game. It was not a memorable win for the Bombers. A famous win.
They probably still called it a famous win.
But one of the signs of good teams is to be able to win when you're not at your best. And I think they did that. So that's cool.
So, yeah. Well,
I thought nobody really stood out to me in this game other than, like, on an individual standpoint, other than Seb Ross. I thought he was really good. We got, a couple suspensions coming out of this game. Marcus Windhager.
Wait, just the one, right?
Is that the only one?
Yeah. So Windhager delivered a bump with his hip that got Sam Durham's head. It was Durham's, no, it wasn't a milestone game, but they celebrated him getting one on the road, I think. Or maybe there was like a couple where he was an unused sub, I forget. But it was a celebration of sorts for Durham. Bigger one for Jake Kelly actually playing his 150th. And Durham did decently well before that point. Eventually did get subbed off for concussion.
This was just not a super well played or great game. And there are a couple of stat lines I want to really refer to that help illustrate that, I think. Although I didn't realize on the positive side, Ben Mackay, 7 intercept marks. Nice job.
Yeah, Mackay been solid in defense to start the year. I think it was the Albert Thurgood account who said, can somebody check on Ben Mackay's lungs? He hasn't been singing this much ever in his career.
Ooh, that's good.
I mean, Essendon and North have some spike between them too, so I really like that there.
I can't wait for him to get tested with like Charlie Dixon and the other Portals this coming week. That's going to be good. That's going to be telling. That's when we're going to find out a lot.
Yeah, and on the other side, it definitely helps the newer look Port backs that Wright will not be there. But Zerk Thatcher against his old side will be fun with that too. And Xavier Dersma against his old side. Real solid game from Dersma. His best yet in black and red. A goal from 23 disposals and 6 marks.
All right, but these
did a bit more of the defensive half than I expected, which is maybe why some of his numbers were higher and maybe allowing some more space for Durham to operate. Without Durham this coming week, I expect Dersma to move a bit further up the oval. I thought Nick Martin throughout this game was going to end up moving to the midfield to just give him more in the inside, but he never did and just kept accumulating kick-ins and holy shit, 44 disposals that meant nothing.
This is like the emptiest, most insignificant 44 disposals ever, and I have a feeling at the end of the year, he'll get the 3 votes when he shouldn't, and that's why we've got our own Brownlow. There were 5 guys in this game that had 30-plus disposals, and we gave votes to one of them.
We're not going to say any more.
Well, actually, sorry, there were
6.
Woo! My favorite stat line out of this game, but Martin, only at 75% efficiency, even with a bunch of kickouts.
Did get a decent amount of intercepts, 7 of them, so credit to that. But
yeah, a lot of uncontested, 8 contested possessions. It's not like he did anything wrong. He filled his role, but it seems like an underutilization of his skills.
That's what I'm getting at there, but that's not even the most interesting stat line from this game. Let's look at the other side there, and
What's a boner?
The answer is somebody who can have an Aaron Hall game.
This was the most fascinating stat line I've ever seen, I think. Behind 32 disposals, 9 marks, 1,018 meters. He wasn't always the kick-out guy. I think he usually was, but I think Josh Battle might have had 1 or 2 of those.
Either that or it was like the next guy in the chain. Yeah, delivered a lot of long kicks. But, this is Aaron Hall type stuff right there. I believe he is our first kilometer gainer of the season.
He got the ball along the boundary a bunch. He had 5 contested possessions.
And here's the big one.
17 turnovers.
17.
17.
17?
17.
I will give a couple more positives. I thought Zach Merritt, I think later in the game, did more than just accumulate numbers. I thought Jai Caldwell was better as the game went on.
Oh, I think Caldwell might have been the best of their midfielders in the second half. Maybe not like right there on the inside, but extending chains of possession a lot.
I didn't realize Dyson Heppel was at nearly 87% efficiency off of his 30 disposals, but yeah, and he didn't do anything that was like the wowed me, but I thought he did a nice job moving through the back. So that was good, I guess. But
Yes.
and this just wasn't a very skillful or exciting or well-played game. I'm trying to think of sequences.
I know that our perception of Heppel has definitely improved in the past year and a half or so, because there was a point like around, at the end of the 22 season, then started 23 when he was not in form at all, where we wondered, is he going to hang it up soon? And he's still got some function.
I thought, let's see, what else?
There are very few like actual sequences from this game that I can really hold on to. And I mean, the better ones do involve Caldwell in the middle or Langford getting at the end of them. When it comes
Late in the game, Langford really stepped up after a quiet start. So did Stringer. So give Essendon credit for making plays down the stretch. Let me check, trying to find who to credit this to.
2 hours later.
Aha, found it. From @BiffTheTick. He's an Essendon fan who lives in Minnesota, I believe.
Minnesota!
He said, St. Kilda reminds me of Wisconsin or Virginia college basketball. Their style encourages ugly, bizarre games, and you can't really judge their opposition well based on performances against them. But hanging with and beating them can really build your confidence. So yeah, they could have been down a lot more early in this game. He also said, the Venn diagram of people who understand this comparison is like 10 people, and I regularly get drunk with 5 of them.
Well, if so, then we are number 7 and 8 out of those 10. And it's a logical comparison for him to make, considering he's a Minnesota alum, maybe, or at least a Gophers fan. And so that's a real rivalry there.
Before we break, did want to mention Saints by expected score were 6 points better. That's not anything staggering, but Essendon only used 61 interchanges, which seemed weird because I don't think they were playing a man short at any point.
Dursma was listed as injured on the app afterward. I'm not sure, though. I don't think they were really a man short at any time.
That reminds me of the many questions that should be asked of Matthew Nix. Why did they only use 59 of theirs?
What?
Yep.
Yeah, and Ryan just trilled in response, so clearly he has something to say about that, too. Maybe we'll talk to him and get his feedback during the break. So yeah, I think it's a good time to take that break and consult with our mascot / third host.
Well, by the way, we should have him just actually on the mic, on the air.
Yeah, but make sure that you come back, because if you don't,
I'll come to your house and murder you!
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
how do you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today. You know the drill. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Americans Footy. I'm on Twitter at Castle Media.
I'm on Twitter at BenjaminHK01, and Brian Harambe, the footy cat himself, is behind the window blinds in the windowsill awaiting the sunrise. He's on Instagram at cat named Brian, and before this recording session, we caught another couple photos of him being a doorstop.
Before I resume, this is going to be my little segment where I talk about other sports for a moment. So, real quick, I discovered recently, and I might have mentioned this on the last episode, that we get Willow on DirecTV. Did I mention that?
Not sure if you did, but I am thrilled by it because we get IPL right now, and that's at 7 a.m. our time, so like perfect morning sports action.
It's just been really fun to watch. Like, Indian people are always entertaining, whether it's their expressions or just, in this case, the crowds are super lit, and there's some really good players in this, and just like the terms they use are funny, and it's like, you get these very cheap, low-quality commercials with, like, actual really good production value on the actual games. And it's just, I don't know if I have a favorite team yet. I definitely have some players I like.
Just players whose names you recognize?
Yeah, and some that I hadn't ever heard of until like the last week or so, like Nandre Berger, who I like for his name, or Andre Russell, who just seems really cool. But yeah, I'm enjoying this a lot, and 2020 cricket is awesome.
I mean, obviously we come from this from more of a baseball perspective, so the pace is much more similar. Just the overall game time is much more similar. I got a real kick out of watching the ODI World Cup this past year, and it was cool seeing some of those guys pop up again. Obviously, plenty of Australians there like Cummins, Marsh, Warner, Head, but also various other people like Rashid Ravindra, for example, along with the many Indian talents in the league. So as someone who was already getting more into cricket, it's cool to see for that reason, and as well as just kind of just the entertainment and the fan engagement from the Indian crowds is great too. By the way, call Prem Jyotish.
Yes. One of the ads is for this like Indian astrologer guy who he seems to have made a crap ton of money if he's advertising everywhere. Yeah, he's like an astrologer, uses like, Indian astrology stuff, not like, zodiac signs that Americans and I assume Australians and stuff follow, which, I think is all just like the dumbest pseudoscience. But yeah, clearly enough people pay this dude. Yeah, the commercials are funny. I do love, I think it's genuinely really cool that they do the coin toss about, 30-ish minutes before each match. And then, they have a live interview with each captain right after about how it's affecting their strategy for the games. There's some really good analysis. Steve Smith is on a lot of these, in studio. It's too bad this is such a short season.
And just kind of has to compete with all the other T20 leagues and also the big international windows, but we're getting a kick out of it while we can.
This is fun, yeah. I'm glad to be watching this. And I think it's also fun because, Test cricket generally promotes, being stuffy and proper and all this. And this is just, way more loose and free-spirited and entertaining. I mean, yes, the crowds at the GABA and stuff are amazing, but generally speaking, Test cricket in most of the world doesn't do that. So I'm enjoying this a lot. That's my main thing. Also, one NRL thing from this past week.
Was it a Falcon?
No. There's a guy named Tyson Smoothie, which is just my favorite name ever.
Smoothie spelled which way at the end?
With a Y.
Interesting. He's
got French heritage, maybe?
He's from Toowoomba. He plays for the Brisbane Broncos.
But yes, Tyson Smoothie. I was just amazed that that's a real person's name.
That sounds like an adult stage name.
No, it just sounds like a kid's cartoon character. God, what was the baseball player? There's Joey Pancake, played at the University of South Carolina. He might have been, I don't know if he was on a championship team there, but he was good. Joey Pancake. Anyway, that's my level of NRL interest. Super Rugby, even though it's a silly name for a league.
Union is better than League.
Yeah, sorry guys, it's just the actual gameplay is more entertaining.
I've also been more acquainted with Union from watching my college rugby team, which is very good. Cal Rugby is consistently one of the top teams in the country, and I mean, there's a reason the coach has been around for 40 years.
I love his quotes each week, just we need to be better.
Oh, just Jack Clark is very, very matter of fact. This is a guy who has done a lot of work with the national team in the past.
Guy cracks me up. It's always just or if they just kick the crap out of somebody, it's just thanks to whoever for a good game. Actually, let's find his quote from the loss to St. Mary's. Let's see.
Yes, St. Mary's isn't just Australia's team in men's basketball. They're also strong in rugby union.
Yes, it was tip of the cap to the Gales. We appreciate them and congratulate them. I am proud of our boys. We played a lot of good rugby. That said, we need to heal up and get back at it. Our best rugby is still ahead of us.
So dry. I mean, I love it. Something really funny about that. He's drier than matzah.
All right,
getting back to the footy.
So we talked about the bad game from Saturday that, technically, it came down to the final seconds. This one was decided with a couple minutes left, but was way more fun, and I think the earlier game should loan some of its points and Brownlow votes. Port Adelaide 13-11-89, defeated by Melbourne 15-6-96.
We were talking about this earlier today, Ethan, this is the sort of game that is great for introducing someone to Australian rules football. It's not, a game that's gonna like blow them away with a crazy ending, not super close, literally right down to the wire. Yeah, maybe there's a last 2 minutes video for this, but there are others that are more fitting of that for this round. But great crowd. I mean, it's Port at home, so you're obviously going to get that there.
The highlight to me was the guy with one hand screaming.
Well, just everybody screaming
And a lot of middle fingers and it was a kid today in college basketball with a great middle finger, NC State fan right behind the coach. That was awesome.
Yes, but my favorite was just like the juxtaposition of all these Port fans screaming and just Ben Brown. Unbothered, one of the cleanest reputations in the league.
I wonder if any of the insults were about him being vegan. I hope so.
Vegan or just very woke.
I always appreciate hecklers who do their research.
I don't know how much Port hecklers do their research.
So going back real quick, though, to the concept of, what game would you show someone? What a lot of people miss is a lot of people just resort to like an all-time great game. And it's like, no, you want to show them something decent. You don't want to like set their expectation like, oh yeah, this is every game. Like if you're showing someone an NBA game and they've never seen basketball, you don't show them Curry hitting like a 35-footer to win the game against the Thunder.
You don't show Klay Thompson's record-breaking quarter.
No, you just show them like a good, not great game. Well, this was more towards great, I think. I think this was the most fun game of the season so far. Umber tier, but not like greatest game ever. I will never forget this.
The way I described it was like mid to low A tier.
I would put it higher than that, like higher A tier. I mean, not S tier, but this is the type of game that like you're looking for like A tier, maybe like not too high to the A tier, but definitely not S tier to show someone right away. And this was certainly that. An excellent goal kicking performance from Melbourne. I think Andrew Whelan with his Wheeler ratings said that in however many simulations he did, Melbourne would only win with those sorts of set shots based on general accuracy ratings 4% of the time. And it was a funny reversal from all the crazy Melbourne X score wins and their losses last year, especially in finals. Counting rush behinds, it was 100 to 65.5. And expected score ended up being a topic in some of the post-game discussion because Ken Hinckley referenced it during his press conference. And then it was mentioned when they were interviewing Max Gawn on Fox Footy afterward, and he said that Simon Goodwin discussing it so much made him want to punch him in the face. Well, he'd have to take him to a nice French restaurant to do that.
I mean, this is the Demons we're talking about.
So, real quick, circling back, the thing with like what game do you show someone is like, if I want to show someone who's never seen baseball a baseball game, I probably show them like a good, 5-3, 5-4 game, not like an insane finish, just like I wouldn't even show them any walk-off whatsoever. That would be like no walk-off. Just show them like a good close game. And I think this was a pretty good example of that where, yeah, Port probably deserved to win this game. But Brown and Fritsch hit some really tough shots. Port had a couple of misses. I think there was, one from Charlie Dixon that would have cut it to 3, looking at the note. Also, Gawn hitting a captain's goal from 50 to close the third quarter to cut it to 4 after Port had gone up by 15.
On the other side, when it came to rucks, after Port got off to a good start, I know Yvonne Soldo missed one from pretty much straight on. That was behind that made it 19-1, and Melbourne regained touch from there.
Did Willie Rioli have a bad miss at some point? Because I thought he had a pretty good game, though he ended up getting charged with 6 turnovers. I didn't think he was bad. I thought he was pretty sharp.
Port Adelaide had some stats way stacked in their favor. They were plus 21 inside 50s, but their entries were much less defined. There were 1 or 2 teams this round where I really had this complaint, where they were straight sets Melbourne-like in their entries, just long and hoping. Meanwhile, the Demons just had steadier, shorter options. Leads were better, and they were much pickier about when they actually went long and, really picked out the favorable matchups there. And that ended up contributing to good efforts from guys like Bailey Fritsch.
That said, if there's a game you're going to bomb it into 50, I would say doing it with Charlie Dixon and not facing Stephen May would probably be a good time to do so. I thought this was a game from Port that honestly, they did not play poorly. I just thought Melbourne made more winning plays.
Yeah, in the first half, there was a whole lot of Alex Neil-Bullen doing that in the middle, starting out a lot of sequences where he's normally kind of one of the middle guys in there.
It was neat to see a lot of people realizing how underappreciated he is. We were kind of hammering that last week, especially you, and now like it's kind of catching on. So I was very happy about that.
And then in the second half, particularly in the fourth, the big midfield names in Petrarca, Oliver, and Viney playing his 200th collectively lifted. And then more on the outside, excellent second half from Caleb Windsor, who should be playing over Jack Billings from this point on. Should have been to begin with. Billings was sent off as what I really saw as a you suck sub, even though he set up a goal right before. Because, I mean, when those sub calls are made, next time he can get off, he might make a good play before them, but it was still a you suck sub. Windsor put on a good delivery to Bailey Fritsch to help grow out the lead to 2 goals with 2.5 left.
It wasn't quite a game over goal, but I would say it would probably put their win probability into the 90s, I think.
I think that's fair. Also, before that, still in the early part of the fourth quarter, kind of around the 1/3 mark, he received from Billings. This was the one right before he was subbed off. Billings, that is. But Windsor got around Jed McEntee and straightened up for a big kick for his first career goal. It reminded me of the Jason Horne-Francis goal at Marvel against the Saints on, I think, a Thursday night of last year. I know it was a primetime game. The difference here was, I think it may have been from a bit longer out, and also they didn't cut to the loading dock right after.
It put him up by 14. Port came back and tied it thanks to a Rivers dangerous tackle that I thought was going to get a suspension. Instead, I think only got a fine that reversed a free kick. But then the D's scored the next 13. Ben Brown kind of taking a hanger over Bailey Fritsch and kicking his third of the night. Then you had the Fritsch goal and then a shot by Fritsch with a little under a minute left that hit the post, but didn't matter. All they needed was a score to make it a free kick game, and that did it. Considering the week the Demons had, and just all the shit surrounding them, to be able to go into this environment and win this game, that's just a really emphatic, resounding win.
That's a huge confidence builder, especially when they're staying over there in Adelaide ahead of the gather round with just a 5-day break there.
That's the most energy I've seen them with post-game, just in terms of like all the big group hugs on the sideline and the way they were singing the song after it.
I mean, big for Jack Viney's milestone, obviously, as well, was his 200th. As I think I mentioned already, he got carried off, and his children as well. I love seeing the children get carried off.
Teams play better in milestone games, I'm convinced.
And Viney did have a milestone goal, but in terms of players who I really thought lifted in this game, Neil-Bullen's right up there, gone with a big volume game with that huge captain's goal. And in the fourth quarter, Petrarca did a really good job closing things out.
I want to talk about some of this from a Port Adelaide standpoint for a minute.
I think that's entirely appropriate. Great job from Willem Drew, who we gave the polished turd for this game. He started and largely stayed on Jack Viney, which was the tag that I called. The commentator seemed surprised and thought maybe instead he would go toward Clayton Oliver, but I thought Viney just seemed like the more natural matchup there.
You had a really good start to the game from Dan Houston, but unfortunately a very quiet fourth quarter. But he was kind of lizard-like for a lot of this game. Like, he had some of those long Nick Blakey runs to launch scores and launch slingshots, and I thought he had played really well. And then, I don't know how much of it was just him running out of gas, how much of it was the D's actively avoiding him, but his fourth quarter impact was minimal. Lockie Jones struggled, and I wonder if he would be one who would be up for maybe getting dropped.
This is a game where I think Port came in with a reasonably good strategy, especially in terms of the back 2/3. I still don't like how much they bombed it, even with the return that the forwards gave them, against the Eagles, because it's the Eagles. And then at the G, where Finlayson and Marshall found their form again against Richmond. I'm not sure, though, if maybe this was also a way to set them up for next week and try to punish the Essendon back line, which is kind of Ben Mackay and next. Yeah, as we said, Mackay against Dixon will be juicy.
O'Lear was pretty quiet in this game.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This is the point where we have to mention Asava.
I was going to get to him. This was the most Asava game I've ever seen. It shows both the upside and physicality that makes him so appealing,
as well as just the nadir of brain fades.
He looks like he's still not confident with the ball, but at least getting better in that area. He didn't give away a single free, but he got beat a couple times, and then the goal line. He's had issues with it before, and he tried to mark this Kazi Pickett kick that probably should have just, if he had realized where he was, probably would have just tried to punch through, because
honestly, it just could have been a mark.
Nah, I think it would have been too high up to easily mark. At least, anyway, he was standing behind the goal line, and he marked it, he tried to mark it and ended up dropping it behind the goal line, and even if he had, it was a goal.
And the funny thing it was round 3-4 years ago where his biggest fade on the offensive side happened as well against the Blues. Were you watching that game live?
I don't think so. I'm not sure, but that was a blowout loss. This one, it ended up a lot more significant. So yeah, that was a thing that happened. Other individual things. I thought Zach Butters didn't do a ton until the fourth quarter. I thought Ollie Wines was physical, but a little sloppy. Kane Farrell, hardly existed.
And I don't think that was much in terms of Melbourne really going to him.
Yeah, this was just
more of just Houston having more of that lizard time on the inside, and maybe Port being a bit neglectful on the outside. And I don't know, maybe that was something that really cost him there. Maybe this was a sort of game where you wonder, how much of a hole did Xavier Dersma leave on the wing?
I thought Port was the better team in the midfield, the middle of the field, but Melbourne dominated the outside. That was both Langdon and Chandler.
And don't forget Windsor.
Yeah, and I thought Melbourne just ultimately, this was probably they wanted it more, but if this continues, we're going to have to raise questions about, can Port Adelaide beat top teams? Also, though, how much do they miss Sam Powell-Pepper right now, just from a physicality standpoint, from making grimy plays that stand out in a game like this? Because I don't think, other than Wines, that they were really that physical.
How much have people just kind of forgotten about Powell-Pepper because he's been out to start this season? I don't know. Well, he'll be back soon enough, and we'll probably start to see a real difference then. But Powell-Pepper can break things open at any point on the field, especially at stoppages, and could have been Port's answer to someone like Kazi Pickett or Cade Chandler. Chandler, I think, is going to be missing some time with the knee injuries that he copped, so he won't be able to play another game in his home state in all likelihood. This must have meant something big to him, though, being able to beat Port, growing up and playing for Norwood before being taken by the D's. I still wonder why there was never a bigger push for a South Australian team to try and bring him home in 2021 and 22, and he was getting limited opportunities. Glad he's getting them now for the D's.
Western Bulldogs 16-10-106, defeating West Coast 3-12-30.
Okay, so I missed the start of this game live because I was supervising and taking part in an event at the synagogue at which I teach.
Yeah, you both work with me.
And so I came home, I think right as the game was getting into halftime, and I wondered how much of the Eagles disappointed already, and was okay with the first quarter.
First quarter was actually kind of good.
Yeah, I was all right.
They probably should have been down more because, expected score, Dogs missing a couple chances where they kicked a bunch of behinds in a row,
and then they kicked 2 goals, 10 for the rest of the game. Jamie Cripps kicking 1-5, got a lot of opportunities. The game head-to-head after he kicked 5 against him. I'm glad they got the delivery to him. The actual forward half play was all right when they got the opportunity. There just wasn't a lot of opportunity getting through that group of Bulldogs there, and this game was decided before halftime. It was very clear, and it was to the point that, yes, we did have our first Victory Cigar substitution of the year in Tom Liberatore.
Congratulations, Libba, and I guess also congratulations to Caleb Poulter for being the one who replaced him.
So, with you having been the one who saw this whole game live, Let's go. Give me your Eagles' thoughts.
It's not that they weren't competing. It's not that they weren't playing hard. It's just an abject lack of talent outside of like Tim Kelly and Elliot Yeo, and even Yeo had some turnover issues. It's just they got completely overwhelmed by really just all of the best Bulldogs, Bont, Liva, Treloar, English especially, English 8, Bailey J. Williams alive. And then because you've got guys that should be matched up against okay players that have to try to take on the great ones, that means that the opposing okay players are matched up against some really bad players that just aren't AFL level, and then that allows a guy like Latham Vandermeer to go off for 23 disposals. And yeah, they're just completely overmatched. Again, they were not shying away from taking the game on physically. It's not an effort thing. It's just a talent thing.
It's a complete skill gap, and you wonder with this, just how much longer will it somehow get worse before it gets better? I would be willing to hedge a bet right now and put some decent money on the Eagles not winning a game in 2024.
I think they will win a game, maybe 2. Entering the year, I thought, yeah, hopefully they win like 4 to 5.
That's out the window.
It already seems like it. But
even if Liam Ryan and Dom Sheed come back healthy, I know Sheed's going to finally start building some game fitness in the waffle. But there are still some older players who are just holding on and should not be in there. Jack Darling has clearly lost a step, and I'm waiting for him to get dropped. In defense, Tom Cole or even Callum Jamieson out of there, because what do you have coming back up? I mean, I imagine if one of them goes out, especially Cole, would just be, all right, Alex Witherden come back in again.
Yeah, Tom Cole is 26, and maybe he just needs a change of scenery. Maybe he's just not
that anymore.
Maybe it's just like, look, it's hard to get up for a game when you're on a team like this. And maybe that's what Ben Mackay was dealing with. Maybe that's the same with Cole, but he looked very overmatched. Jermaine Jones just did not play a smart game, a lot of bad mistakes. And yeah, Bailey J. Williams has improved a lot in the last year, but when he's bad, he's really bad. And he just got dominated by Tim English. Not many positives here. Jeremy McGovern is the guy keeping the defense from really falling apart, and he deserves and is receiving a lot of credit.
He's receiving credit from us. He's the first player this year to get multiple polished turd points.
Broadcast team seem to appreciate him. Oh, I'm going to mention one other thing that doesn't relate to this game that I meant to mention earlier, just because thinking about broadcasters in Western Australia. I like Adam Papaleo.
I like the kind of videos that you see from him as well. I think Frio had one, just kind of him showing his preparations for the game. And I think he's one of the most solid broadcasters out there right now. I might even rate him as Fox Footy's most consistent, even above Anthony Hudson.
I don't know, but I think he calls a good game and just deserves a lot of credit. Anyway, Ruben Jinby had a couple of bad turnovers and mistakes. He definitely gets after it, though.
There's a want to compete, especially from Jinby and Reed on the inside. I want them to keep casting Harley Reid inside. Yes, he probably will want to leave after 3 years, but in that time, get what he can out of him, and it kind of needs to be a baptism by fire in this first year.
The thing with Harley Reid that I've noticed, he really wants to take on everybody physically and will try to run anybody over, and sometimes that's probably not smart because,
okay, you know what, he'll learn.
It's just here's the thing. At a junior level, he's just bigger and stronger than everyone. At this level, he's one of the bigger and stronger guys, but there are guys who can meet him physically.
Just because you're the strongest guy in Tongala before your balls even dropped doesn't mean you can take on Marcus Montempelli or Tom Liberatore.
It's like, growing up playing basketball where you're just bigger than everyone and can reach over everyone, and then when you get to a higher level, it's like, oh, I actually have to put in the work and box out and stuff.
Okay, the difference is, he's putting in the work. He just doesn't. It's more of a case of knowing limits on the mental side of things, and he'll learn. But it needs to be that sort of tough love. You're getting this experience, and you're gonna fucking learn from it.
And not having Oscar Allen, there's obviously a lack in having that big reliable target, and that's probably one of the reasons they scored 30 points instead of the expected 57. This game was not going to be close, but it could have been better. They had never scored less than 52 at Marvel, and they scored 30. It just got really out of hand. Jack Petrocelli is another one that, I mean, he did have like 7 marks, but sometimes you wonder about him. Even Jake Waterman, who I really like, had a couple of misses that kind of undid a lot of the work that his energy provides. Just for this team to win some games, they're going to have to kick straight. That's the first thing.
And that's something that they've been able to do these past few years in comparison. You look at their wins, and it was actually solid kicking performances. But then there's a matter of just actually having a healthy enough list to compete and having the actual mix of experience in there, and they're just not going to have that. So here's a question. How much of this are the Sydney Swans going to put up on them at Mount Barker?
Last year, the Lions put up like 150 on North there. I don't think it's going to be 200. I think the Eagles are going to come out with like a sense of, these guys humiliated us. We're not going to let that happen again. And I think they are going to
let it happen again.
No, I think they're going to, I'd be surprised if it tops 140. Although the Swans will be angry, I still think there's no way it's as bad. I think like 140 to 60-ish, something like, or I don't know. I think, what did I say earlier? Maybe like 132 to 59. Wasn't that what I said when we were talking earlier?
That sounds right. I'm going to give them a 1 in 3 chance of putting up 200.
I think that's way too high of a chance. You're being way too generous. Well, I think like,
who is going to stop them?
Brady Hall?
No, not after this past week. Completely outdone on the defensive side.
But that's a learning experience for a kid.
I hope so. I'm just not optimistic.
The disappointment for me lies more in like Tom Barris regressing after being so good a couple years ago, and just a lot of like low IQ plays. But yes, back to what could actually help the Eagles win a game at some point. A game where someone other than Tim Kelly in the midfield can be physical. I guess, well, other than Kelly and Yo, you need a third physical midfielder.
That can be Reed or Jinby at times. But Reed needs to be more heavily cast there.
And defensively, you're going to need a game where Barris is intercepting a bunch. And obviously just like convert on your chances. That's a given, but it was not a fun watch, and I'm glad that you're usually the one tasked with watching this team instead of me.
And I will never be able to say the same about Geelong because they're never down. Okay, we've taken way too much fucking time on this game. Let's get to the other Sunday game. Richmond 11-16-82, defeating the Sydney Swans 11-11-77. Well done, Adam Uze.
Congrats. It's weird because, I think back last year we lost to Richmond, and I remembered like, God, I fucking hate losing to these guys. But between the fact that they were 0-3 and that I've never particularly been a fan of the Swans, who I do have a ton of respect for talent-wise,
and also that we like this young Richmond crop and just the big performance for them in this game.
And it's cool to see a coach get his first win.
I love the players bringing him into the post-game circle and dousing him with Gatorade.
That's a sign of good culture.
The culture is actually damn good.
After the way Richmond had lost to Carlton and to a lesser extent Port Adelaide, they were in the game with a lot of the way, I was just happy for them to see this one through. You were the one who was really giving like the in-depth analysis, and you, as well as the broadcast team, which combined Dwayne Russell and Matt Hill. So Russell actually called an okay game. He didn't say too much corny stuff.
I think it helped that Hill was there with him. Hill with like still that more horse racing background and cadence and just voice in general. But I am really liked Hill's broadcast thus far this year, and I'm glad he's getting some time on Fox Footy as well as the Channel 7 jobs. But I know what you're going to say here, heaping a full season's worth of praise on Nick Flostone.
Yeah, I didn't notice it as much as you did, but you were pointing it out. You were watching the game more closely than me. I thought this was a game that was, other than that, largely devoid of like great individual performances, and even his was almost all clustered in the second half, almost all in the fourth quarter, I thought.
I think his best was in the fourth quarter, yes, but the overall body of work was certainly there, with 29 disposals, 15 intercepts, 13 marks, 577 meters gained, and 5 score launches, which I think is just an underrated stat. We see that. I think it's an awesome stat,
and I wish I had paid attention to it before this year.
It's a great stat to really look at offensive impact from the back half, And that's a spot where Vlostone has always been good, captaining the defense, really being in charge of their movement, and having good one-on-one wins, not just directly in the air, but off contest, some good ground ball gets as well. This was just a complete and fully effective game from him. You don't see defenders, even when they don't have as many contested possessions, going at 100% efficiency. And Vlostone did that despite being joint second in possessions on his team.
Fun fact, this was a weekend all 4 Big Four clubs won. And yeah, it's just like, it's funny because a couple years ago, Richmond had posted like their attendance goal for each game. And now it's like, this was probably close to a 50-50 crowd,
which definitely does also say more about where the Swans are and how they've kept that South Melbourne support. But when you have this slow start and you're clearly on a kind of 1 to 2 years down the line trajectory as Adam Uze builds up his list profile, yeah, your attendances are probably going to drop. But this was an enjoyable game, and it really showed Uze kind of learning in-game because Richmond's setup ahead of the ball was much better in the second half. And even though the Swans ended up getting the better of a lot of contests and were a bit more efficient when they were inside 50 overall, Richmond had the better looking attack, especially in the third quarter when they scored 5 goals to 1.
There were stretches, first quarter as well, where I thought Shea Bolton was just phenomenal. And I want to recognize him as, talent-wise, he is not an S-tier player. He is an upper-tier player, but just on a watchability level and an excitement level, there are very few that can come close to what he does. He is so entertaining.
I would put him as like a double S tier in terms of watchability, and
he's Hollywood in the best possible way.
And I love that it's not just in the 450, that he has his impact in 2/3 of the field, really.
Other than that, this game I thought was just kind of funky from the point that, yeah, like I mentioned, only a couple guys really were great throughout. Like, you had Noah Balta, who ended up getting hurt, I believe.
Yeah, he's got MCL damage that is going to see him sidelined for 3 to 5 weeks.
But, like, he was only high impact in, like, a few specific moments.
I'd say the more consistent forward performer was definitely Tom Lynch. Oh, he's out too.
He also had like a little shithousery, like a very Tom Lynch moment where he like gave away a 50 and then kept getting tangled up with, I think it was Golden, like on the way from his forward 50 back to midfield just because he's Tom Lynch.
I was surprised he didn't give up a second.
I know a lot of people don't like the guy, but I kind of like him because he's a good villain. And that's the thing. I try not to hate on the same people that everyone else does. I also think it's just unimaginative.
Like how Braden Maynard is also a good villain.
Oh, he's great at it. I like guys who know how to be a villain. I think Maynard might be a little more intentional than Lynch, but yeah, he's good for this. Other than that,
I do agree that kind of the strangeness of this game with both teams going on 5+ goal runs, Sydney's going from the second quarter into the early third.
A credit to Richmond for not folding. The Robbie Fox goal going into half to put Sydney up 8 seemed like it should have really been a game breaker, and the Tigers responded.
Yeah, I mean, they responded to that 6-goal run with 5 of their own, and that was the story of the third quarter. The 1 goal for the Swans to extend their run, and Richmond getting their other 5. I really thought that Fox goal there was going to be the defining moment of the game, and we were really big on Fox's impact. Just as a forward in the first few rounds of the season, he's found some staying power there. First having that annoyance job on Jake Lever, and then taking strong marks and kicking a couple important goals, including that one there at halftime siren.
I also thought Liam Baker was pretty good for a lot of this game, and then it looks like he's getting a 1-game suspension, right?
Yeah, that was from an incident in the middle of the second quarter for rough conduct against Lewis Melican. I thought that because Melican wasn't concussed, maybe he would have gotten off, but clearly not. This was very much a team win for Richmond, and a lot of the smaller players did the job. Much more sound game out of Morris Rioli Jr.
He was good. I'm happy for him. He's definitely a guy I'm rooting for.
Seth Campbell with a lot of almost moments, but solid movement in the forward 50.
Rising star. Could it be Campbell? Could it be... I don't think Draper had enough of the ball. Who was the other one that I thought could have been rising star this round? Oh, Caleb Windsor. I think it might end up being Windsor.
I think Windsor would deserve it. I also want to mention, even though he's on the bigger side, thinking about this younger cast for Richmond, Tom Brown with some really solid delivery that earned him a lot of praise from Richmond fans. And on a rewatch of the second half, I could really see why that was.
I also want to recognize Ben Miller for his one-on-one defending because, than that, like early in the game especially, Richmond was getting eaten alive by Sydney's Talls, and I think that's going to be a persistent problem. It was against Port, it was to an extent against Carlton, and if Max King kicks his first, that could be really ugly next week. Like, I think King, if he makes his first, ends up going like 6-1. But Miller did a good job, and Dylan Grimes, who was out injured, was not missed.
Do you see Miller as being the better one-on-one defender long-term over Tyler Young? Or do you say still Young over Miller?
I don't know, but in the immediate moment, it's definitely Miller.
It's been
Young came back in from this game after being concussed. So, definitely in this game it was. And I think Miller will be able to stay in the back after a performance like this, even with Balta and Lynch going down, because you have some logical inclusions there, like Samson Ryan. And maybe also this is a game where Richmond just leans smaller in terms of, they've already got it with Rioli and Campbell being better. Maybe Mykelti Lafau has a bit more of a taller forward responsibility, and you get a first game into Kane McAuliffe, who has been lighting up the VFL these past couple weeks.
Oh yeah, Lafau, first 2 goals, was it?
Yeah, first 2.
Only a handful of touches, but the ones he had were good. His kicking ability was really nice. What a great story. Other than that, I thought, even though at times he's looked washed, I thought Camden McIntosh actually had a pretty good game as like Walmart brand, or I guess you said Coles brand would maybe be more accurate. Jack Sinclair, like covering that kind of wing area, exiting out of the defensive 50. Yeah, I thought McIntosh actually played pretty well, and I thought there were some signs of growth from Thompson Dow. And, it's a lot more fun to have those signs
in a win.
Yeah, I still think, look, if you had to guess right now, I would probably think the Tigers would be somewhere between like 13th and 15th on the ladder. I feel decent about them being 15th. I'd probably have to consider strength of schedule and such, but this was just a nice win for them.
And by the way, I forgot to mention before we close out our discussion on this one and move to Easter Monday, one other smaller player that I regret not mentioning earlier is Ryan Mansell.
You mentioned him briefly, did you not?
No. Wow. But had been a fringe player for a lot of the past couple years. I think had a suspension last year that probably soured people's reputation. Has started.
That the VFL one?
No, you're thinking Tyler Sonzi.
Thank you.
It was the Frio game, the win out west, where all of Richmond's Westerners led off, where he had that bump on James H. That was the one. But I always knew he had some pressure forward ability. He's had that to start the year, and he's furthered that this year with much better actual ball handling forward craft between solid kicking for goal and a couple good deliveries as well. He had 3 assists, and I really took note of each of them. So a lot of positives to build off here, and we'll see how much those can persist as they go into the gather round, where they'll play the Saints out at Norwood. That'll be an interesting one to watch because I'm sure that'll be packed. At least that small. It will. It's Norwood. It will be. But how's Jack Sinclair going to be in that one? Obviously, he has to be more inside because Norwood has basically no wings. That'll be fun.
Shame Geelong isn't playing there. I like playing at places with no wings.
Speaking of Geelong, Easter Monday, Hawthorn 10-10-70, defeated by Geelong 17-4-106. One of the most accurate goal kicking performances we've seen in our time watching the sport. Happy 350th Tom Hawkins. He had 4 and was gifted the last one by Jeremy Cameron, which ruined one of our friends' multis.
Yeah, a guy we follow, ripped in half, had Cameron 3 or more, Hawkins 3 or more, Henry 2 or more, and then Close and Myers anytime.
Okay, close there. And again, we don't really follow the betting side other than Nathan Brown's bets and Nathan Brown's hit in the second quarter. Holy cow. But fact of the matter is, Cameron giving that one off as a milestone present to Hawkins meant that Ripped couldn't convert. And I feel bad for the guy genuinely for that one. I think Ollie Henry, with his 4 goals, is actually probably the best of the forwards on the day, and he had that great kick to set up Cameron giving it off to Hawkins in the goal square as well. Henry did a good job overall beating James Sicily. Sicily has looked much less impervious in defense to start the season.
So 43-7 first quarter, aided by some major Hawthorn mistakes, including Luke Bruce getting into the forward 50. He gets Tom Stewart to slip. I don't know if he so much broke his ankles or it was just slippery, but then he slipped and Stewart got him for holding the ball.
As we would say in America, tackled by the turf monster. It broke his ankles back.
Also, it was not raining at this point. It rained starting in the third quarter, and we had a lightning delay before the fourth that lasted about half an hour.
And then, holy shit, the rain was torrential to start the fourth. We take note of it when you can hear it on the broadcast.
I didn't notice that, but you did. I think of that from the Bulldogs playing against Portland last year.
Oh, yeah, we are very much ready for the...
Okay, now you're just like using it as much as you can.
I mean, that's kind of how we do it when the actual hits. And I'm just laughing because I'm going to be the one to input all of this in there. So, I don't know, maybe editing Benjamin, throw that in a couple more times for the hell of it.
But the actual football in this game was quite interesting as well. I do want to mention, though, the field does drain pretty well. Unlike the field at Churchill Park in Lautoka, where the Fijian Druil play, which gave me some of the best visuals I've ever seen out of any sporting event, just with like these massive splashes from every step anybody took during their win over the Western Force.
This was so funny. But back to the Easter Monday clash.
43-7 after a quarter. Tanner Bruin had 15 disposals in the first quarter.
But then was quiet, though.
Had 3 in the second. Still finished with a team high and second most for the game, 27. He was fine. I just thought there were other guys who were a little bit more impactful, but I thought 2 of Geelong's best players, at least for the first 3 quarters before the lightning delay, were Jarman Impey and Nick Watson, especially in the first quarter.
What was the thing you said about Nick Watson?
If he's a wizard, it's Gilderoy Lockhart.
And then he did actually kick one.
He kicked a really nice one in the fourth quarter, but man, he had some really bad misses.
Who put a hex on this wizard to have that miss basically from right in front of goal? Is that our miss of the year?
I think Watson's going to end up being a really good player, so I'm going to make jokes at his expense while I can.
Meanwhile, you just constantly make jokes at Jack Ginnivan because he's Jack Ginnivan, and now he plays for an even more heated rival of Geelong.
Okay, a few things. First off, I think Jack Ginnivan would be a cool guy to have a few beers with.
I almost want to.
Second, he's friends with the brother of Cal punter Jamison Sheehan.
Yeah, who's now playing in the CFL, I think, for Winnipeg.
Third, he got taken high a few times in this game, but he also tried to sell a few. And there was a lot of discourse about it, and I'm just going to leave it at this. First impressions matter, and he tried to sell the first couple, and I think that affected the rest of the game when there were a few where he actually got taken high.
It's also not this individual game, though.
No, it's not. You combine his pre-existing reputation with the first couple in this game, and the last one as well, by the way, and it was pretty obvious. Also, I thought it was really funny, Connor McDonald, thought he was shushing the crowd. I think he was doing something else. I'm not sure what kind of hand signal he was making when the Hawks were down 30, and then Ginnivan showing off when he had cut the lead to 30 in the fourth. But yeah, Hawks actually turned it around, dominated center clearances in the second quarter, and went into half down just 11. Bobby Orchol had a nice second quarter, so did Cam McKenzie. Their best player throughout was clearly James Worpel, who had 36 disposals and was more kick-based than handball-based. Also 8 tackles, gained over 800 meters. Just played a good, clean game, and, he was a Geelong Falcon, and I believe he's friends with Brian Myers. So, Brian, if you could recruit him to come home, that would be really awesome.
And maybe tell Cooper Stevens to come along, too, because he might actually get an opportunity.
Third quarter, Jack Ginnivan comes out and misses a snap. Bobby Orchol kicks one, and all of a sudden it's a 4-point game, and I'm really concerned. And then, for some reason, nobody in the Geelong forward 50 is moving around. Everyone's just standing there, and then Zach Guthrie hits Toby Conway right on the money, and Conway kicks his first career goal. Oh yeah, Toby Conway played.
He didn't just play. I mean, no, he was not the best ruck in terms of the actual pure ruck work on the day. That was Lloyd Meek. Welcome back, Lloyd. Glad he got the opportunity. It was necessary for him to be in over Ned Reeves, but it was post-hit-out work where Conway definitely shown. And like
just a couple of the hitouts to advantage that he got, including one in the fourth quarter, just like he's ready for this. And he's making winning plays, even if the numbers aren't amazing yet. It's like this dude passes the eye test. That's the biggest thing. And again, making winning plays. And you know who made a whole bunch of winning plays in a row in the third quarter after Conway's goal?
Are you going to talk about Brian Myers now?
No. I'm going to talk about someone who was really high on my shit list last year.
Brandon Parfit.
Yes. Yeah, this was awesome.
He followed up from a game where he could be in the coaches' votes from last Friday
To indefinitely being in the votes, I think.
yeah, and being one of Geelong's best in just a little over 60% time on ground.
I think he sat a bunch at the start of the fourth quarter, but
21 disposals and an octopus because 10 tackles in 61% game time. What was the thing that you posted, Ethan? I mean, these past couple of games have been prove-it games for him. Here it is.
Oh, yes. I finally came up with a scenario where taking a dump is a positive thing. It was time to shit or get off the pot, and he took the biggest dump of his life.
My God, it must be over 100 Courics.
Yeah, this thing was like Bono-sized. He was awesome. I was so happy. I'd like to pretend that he and Jake Kolajashny just spent the entire offseason reading my mean tweets about them. I also think maybe Nick Watson did that during the weather delay because he played such a good fourth quarter. But anyway, first, he used his physicality to create a rush forward out of the midfield that led to what was called a deliberate out of bounds off of Blake Hardwick that really was just an unfortunate deflection for him. And Tyson Stengel scored from the left boundary. Stengel played a really good third quarter as well. Then Parfit was teaming up with Conway for a center clearance. Perfect delivery to Ollie Henry. Then he keeps one alive on the boundary, sells candy on Jai Newcomb, and Brian couldn't work, but Stengel was there and delivered to Tom Hawkins in front of Sam Frost. And all of a sudden the lead's out to 28. He was then in on another center clearance, although then Ollie Henry missed a really easy shot.
Still, though, it all turned around from there, and I think it was perfect turning around the game. And then also there was a play from Jack Henry there before that prevented things from getting out of hand. It was a smother that he put on a Blake Hardwick handball. Oh yeah, it was his 150th. I think that got kind of overshadowed there, and there was an immediate rebound there.
Yeah, that was highlighted on the post-game show.
Oh, I saw it right then and there. That was when Tom Hawkins hit the far right post, but that was after Conway had broken the run with his first goal, but prevented Hawthorn from reasserting themselves. And soon enough, the Cats had ballooned that run out from 1 goal to 4, and they kept control from there.
Hawthorn did make things a little interesting in the fourth quarter, coming out right away and getting the Ginnivan goal, but then Lloyd Meek missed left after they had a bunch more pressure, and the Cats kind of reasserted control. Didn't actually get a goal for a while there, but then Ollie Henry's fourth really put it out of reach.
And then
Brian hit a set shot from 45 meters.
It's amazing. We had fours at the end of this game. Ollie Henry with 4, Hawkins with 4, and Myers with his 4th of the year. Brian Myers is averaging over a goal a game.
And Brian Harambe's lying on the floor staring at us.
Yeah, I think he kept hearing his name and got...
Yeah, it definitely got his attention.
Yeah. Hi, Brian.
Oh, yeah, his eyes just got opened up way more.
But, Brian did the right things as well. I just thought you were going to shoehorn in more commentary about it. But yeah.
Second quarter, he was quiet. Second quarter showed you what Hawthorn can look like when they're playing well out at the middle and also getting awarded a free on every center bounce, which was an annoying thing that happened to the Cats a bunch last year, too. Jai Newcomb's second quarter was good.
Second quarter was where Newcomb and also Cam McKenzie really shone. I think McKenzie was probably third best for Hawthorn in this game behind Chol and then obviously Warple up top. And you can even put an argument for McKenzie to have been their second best. I know he was in the top 20 for the round by ranking points, so well done, Frenchie.
Chol, by the way, is it just an effort thing? Because, man, when he's on, he's good. Other individual things, Jack Henry, there were a couple times where he let his man that he was supposed to be covering get loose, and that was annoying. But other than that, solid. And again, at the end of Koning had a much better second half after a poor start to the game. He was kind of the second ruck for this game, which makes me wonder Were they saving Mark Blitzovs from a high-intensity role because next week you got English, Bond, and Liva? I'm guessing that's what it was. And it dawned on me about an hour after the game, or maybe a little less than that. It was just like, oh, because it was a quieter game for Blitzovs. And Mitch Duncan played pretty well, setting guys up kind of on the outside of the second quarter, and shows you just how important he is. Brad Close was really good in the first quarter and then was involved less, but was in on one of the sequences to help put the game out of reach. And yeah, DeConing got a lot better. 3 weeks in a row, Jake Kolajashny has not done anything to really frustrate me. He's just been rock solid. That he's back in 2022 for him right now. Jack Bowes came on as the sub for Tom Atkins and had an unbelievably good quarter, maybe the best quarter he's played since joining the Cats, and definitely should be in the 22 next week.
Here's the question. Who do you slide out? I would think maybe Oisin Mullen, even with that one play that
oh my God.
This is your Heath Chapman.
Yes, I will be thinking about this in the bathtub.
And you will actually take a bath just to think about this.
Yes, I actually will.
This was
so cool.
This was the one to cut off Mitch Lewis.
Yeah, so Lewis was going to get out the back from crumbing after getting the ball from Henry, and he was going to have basically a fast break. And instead, Oisin comes in, gets the ball, runs, eludes everyone, and then has this perfect kick to, I want to say Blitzovs? Yeah, it was Blitzovs. This was just these are the flashes. And he's still got things he's got to learn, some of the instincts. There are times when he doesn't get rid of the ball soon enough. He probably needs to build up a little more on the physical side, but his ability to move in open space, yeah, that was awesome. That was so fun. And another time I just want to mention how good Zach Guthrie was. His instincts were great. He just makes winning plays on all parts of the ground. And it's amazing how much he's developed. And I think that's just ever since the coaches realized he's not the same player as his brother. One thing I want to correct you on. Well, two things. You were big on Henry Hustwaite and he hardly did anything today.
I was expecting more of a prominent role for Hawthorne's big midfielders to be able to body up against the younger, less stocky crowd. And outside of it was more the finesse that ended up winning out. Brew was able to body up to bigger players, and Jai Clark won out. I think it was also just with the rain having less of an impact until obviously the fourth quarter. Connor Nash accumulated, but I didn't think was anything special. So yeah, it was more of an incorrect anticipation about the weather there that led me down that path.
Yeah, it was actually really nice weather until the third quarter, and then
here go hell come.
Hawthorne needs that combo. Even without Will Day, you can still just nuke him, and Nash can give you a lot, especially with how well Warple's playing. But this was nice. Rivalry wins are nice. Sticking it to the Hawks is always nice, even though I still, compared to some of the other big Melbourne clubs, I don't have it in for them as much, just because I haven't seen them as good as much. But they're a lot easier to say positive things about when they're down. Something else you were dead wrong on. You were mad about Sean Manna coming out, and then Ollie Dempsey ended up with 22 disposals and 11 contested possessions that I didn't realize it was 22. And Tyson Stagel, 2 goals, 18 disposals, 9 contested possessions. So
that was another thing where it was, more of seeing the overall weather forecast, because I didn't think Mullen would be able to stand up in the rain. And while the weather wasn't great in the first few quarters where he had his impact, he did well enough. So it was more a surprising approval of Oisin Mullen. So because the round had a late ending, we don't have our Mark and Goal of the Week nominees yet, but I think it's fair to say that we have some candidates that we should discuss. Mark, there was one in this game, right?
The one that I remember was Tyler Brockman in the midfield for the Eagles. I had texted you that there was a nominee, didn't specify who it was or if it was a goal or mark, and there was a really bad breakdown, and it was where the Eagles defense just kind of
were magnetically repelled away from Latham Vandermeer.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was that or if they just forgot he existed, but that was bad. Should have mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, but I'd say Brockman over, it was Mitch Lewis for the one. It was a kick that was probably intended for Chol, but Lewis ended up marking out of a pack. Goal of the Week, I think, is less obvious, but Cody Waitman had a great roller in that.
That's probably the one. And main character, I think we haven't had obvious main characters yet, but I'm going to go with the entire Melbourne Football Club. To come off a week with all the press around them, everything about the drugs and the rumors just piling up there, and weathering injuries to their two all-Australian defenders, going on an extended road trip and putting on a performance like that, where they really ground out a win and definitely silenced some doubters in the process and have a more favorable matchup going into the... Gather round. Yeah, this was, as I said earlier, a huge confidence-building week. The other guy that could have been a main character, but I think his club did a good job not letting it get out of hand, is Sam Wicks. He didn't travel with the Swans to Melbourne. There was something about him and another player and an ex-girlfriend, and they seem to have taken care of it all in-house. And it seems like rumors were proven to not have that much behind them, but they did, they did damage control. Yeah, damage control. Like, not crisis management, because it wasn't a real crisis, it seems. But yeah, I think with the Wicks drama having been dealt with, your main character is the Melbourne Football Club. And that's going to do it then for this episode, as Brian Harambe joins Ethan on the bed. Couple of quick things. We used the soundbite 13 times.
13!
Also, I would like to wish you all, even though you will be listening to this a couple days after, a happy Dingus Day. Actual holiday. It's a Polish thing. It's celebrated in Buffalo. Basically, if you're a boy, you go find a girl you like and splash her with water and hit her with a pussy willow branch. This is a real thing. So on Pussy Willow Day, the cats came to play. I'm not sure if there's like there's no full poem out of that, but there's something to it. All right, happy Smegus Dingus. Probably Schmegus. I don't know, but it's funny.
Yeah,
I'll just say.
It is. As a reminder from earlier, I am on Twitter at BenjaminHK01.
I'm on Twitter at Castle Media.
Brian Harambe is on Instagram, a cat named Brian. And all three of us are on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Americans Footy. This has been a long day, but a fun day, just kind of remembering what happened in this very long round. And we're going to have this again 4 weeks from now for Anzac round. So let's see if we have some better knowledge retention then.